UFO TV is proud to bring you the top 10 UFO whistleblowers of all time. Coming in at number 10, pilot John Lear. John Lear is one of ufology's most legendary and colorful whistleblowers. Highly regarded by aviators worldwide, John has flown for the CIA, major airlines, and 150 types of aircraft. He's worked for 28 different aircraft corporations and holds 18 world speed records. But in 1989, Lear stepped out of his pilot's pilot role with a series of revelations about UFOs, which he claimed to have first become interested in after learning about England's 1980 Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. Conversations with former agency colleagues confirmed that our government knew a lot about this mystery and that a very real cover-up was in place. More than that, he learned that the military actually held craft of undetermined origin in highly secured locations, along with the remains of their non-human pilots. Over the years, John Lear has aligned himself with whistleblower Bob Lazar, which we'll learn about later, been caught observing flight tests at Area 51, and also believes that some very dark deals have been struck between us and the visitors, like human beings being exchanged for technology, the implanting of small transmitters inside people's brains, and other anxiety-provoking scenarios. But just when John Lear seems to be at his most extreme, evidence surfaces to give the claim some credibility. Fan or foe, this completely unique UFO whistleblower has connections and sources that few others can match or even imagine. Number 9, Sergeant Major Robert Dean. Now, Robert Dean is what we would call a classic UFO whistleblower. He spent 27 years in the Army as a combat infantry unit commander in Korea and Vietnam, and in intelligence field operations Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam as well. Retiring with the rank of Command Sergeant Major, Dean served in intelligence field operations while stationed at Supreme Allied Powers Europe, also known as SHAPE, the military arm of NATO, and he held a cosmic top-secret clearance. It was at SHAPE that he was able to study a series of highly classified documents known as the Assessment, and where his interest in UFOs really began. Classified Cosmic Top Secret, the Assessment discussed the existence of extraterrestrial reality. Having access to this extraordinary report, it changed Robert Dean's life. So much so that he has dedicated his life to bring to public attention the truth about UFOs, with special emphasis on gaining immunity from prosecution for former military personnel who have knowledge of UFO-related information or have been involved in military UFO incidents, thus allowing them to testify before an appropriate congressional committee without fear of losing their pensions or other military benefits, if Congress ever has the courage to undertake such a venture. But there is more to Dean's story. He claims to have had numerous encounters with extraterrestrials himself. He describes them as varied in their nature and in their appearance. Some motivated to be of assistance to mankind, others very much the opposite in their intentions. He describes some as humanoid in appearance, and among this group, a percentage so human-like in appearance that they can pass among us totally unnoticed. An account both fascinating and chilling in its implications. Robert Dean is yet one more who has sacrificed so much that we the people might have a better chance of lifting the lid on the greatest question that has ever faced the human race. At number 8, physicist Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar is certainly one of the most controversial of the UFO whistleblowers, and no wonder. He claims that in 1988 and 1989, he was part of a research and study team stationed at S4, a secret location near Area 51, tasked with reverse engineering extraterrestrial spacecraft. It was here he claimed to have seen 9 different vehicles and learned of their methods of propulsion. Now, detractors say that there's no record of Lazar having attended the schools he claims to, while supporters counter that his work history and credentials were doctored to dissuade the public of his authenticity. Lazar's first impression was that the saucer-shaped crafts were of terrestrial origin, but closer examination, a review of documents he had access to, and the opportunity to board one of the craft convinced him that this was not the case. Now, whatever view you may lean toward, there's no denying this. In May 2013, the distinguished ufologist Richard Dolan presented a video interview at the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure, which took place at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The subject of the interview, a man in his 70s, said that he was speaking out for the first time due to the fact that he was terminally ill and wanted to finally put the information he possessed on the record. He had learned all this during his time as an operative for the CIA, and he went on to corroborate Lazar's account of S4, making clear to the researchers that the facility contained extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now, while the jury may be still out on Bob Lazar, we feel that he has earned the right to be considered one of the most outstanding UFO whistleblowers in history. Number 7, Airman Larry Warren. Our next name on the top 10 UFO whistleblowers list is Larry Warren, arguably the single most important UFO incident to take place since Roswell transpired in Suffolk, England on 3 successive nights in December 1980. The Rendlesham Forest UFO case is now regarded as the UK's best known and best documented UFO incident, and it might never have come to the public attention if it had not been for the courage, dedication, and information supplied by one single man, Larry Warren. For years, before any of the other witnesses came forward, Larry stuck to his guns, stood his ground, as he was criticized, ridiculed, attacked, misrepresented, misquoted, picked apart, and when all else had failed, ignored. But his account has stood the test of time. And thanks to him, we have so much of the best evidence on the record. This includes the release of the Deputy Base Commander's report on the events, a segment of a tape recording of his own UFO incident, the actual breaking of the story in 1983 in England's largest tabloid, and a shocking variety of scientific evidence derived from the exact location where the UFO he and others observed on the third night of events. Now, Larry was the first of the witnesses to confide particulars of what he had seen to a non-military personnel, and to reveal the fact that at the time of the events, the United States was in a serious nuclear treaty violation with the UK. The unauthorized disclosure of this classified information resulted in another fully documented UFO first: the suspension of a UFO witness's passport by the State Department for speaking out on sensitive defense issues in a public forum on foreign soil. It took no less than a former United States Attorney General to assist us in getting his passport restored. Attorney General Ramsey Clark served under both Presidents John F. Kennedy and Johnson. At number 6, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. For 20 years, Dr. J. Allen Hynek was the most influential figure in international ufology, but his involvement in the field and status as a whistleblower were somewhat accidental. A PhD in science from the University of Chicago led to a teaching position at Ohio State University, then to overseeing the Smithsonian's Astrophysical Observatory at Harvard. In 1948, the Air Force invited him to begin looking into UFO sighting reports. Initially skeptical, Hynek contributed to the CIA's notorious 1953 Robertson panel that pioneered the art of UFO debunking. He went on to work with the University of Colorado on its huge, misleading 1969 report on UFOs, but by then was becoming dismayed by the Air Force's inept and unscientific handling of the subject. Dr. Hynek's book, The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry, was published in 1972. The book accused the Air Force of conducting their UFO investigations with indifference and incompetence, and gave voice to his growing view that some UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin. The UFO experience was actually well received by many in the scientific community, and in 1973 he founded the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. In 1977, he became the field's most prominent figure by helping to promote Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. His cameo appearance toward the end of the film is still memorable and made him into something of a pop culture figure and a regular speaker at UFO conferences. He presented the case for UFOs at the United Nations. By the time of his death in 1987, he was the best known ufologist in the world. Number 5. Major Donald E. Keyhoe. Now, back in the early days of UFO research, Donald E. Keyhoe was the world's most famous UFO writer and media personality. A graduate of the United States Naval Academy, Keyhoe distinguished himself as a combat pilot in World War II and retired from the Marines with the rank of major. In an early, overwhelmingly marked by Welcome the Space Brothers type books and information, it was Keyhoe who reset the bar and led the field in his rational, scientific approach to the question of otherworldly visitations. His books were the first to bring this point of view to readers around the world, and he sold in the hundreds of thousands. He was the first UFO superstar, and millions heard him interviewed on radio shows and in the nation's leading publications. His reputation for thoroughness and accuracy were unsurpassed, and even the United States Air Force's Office of Public Information came to recognize him as if not the leading civilian authority in the investigation of UFOs. In addressing Keyhoe's belief that they were advanced craft from other planets, the Air Force conceded that it had, quote, never denied the flying saucers are from another planet, but if the apparently controlled maneuvers reported by competent observers are correct, then the only remaining explanation is the interplanetary one. Can you imagine the Air Force conceding this point to a UFO writer today? Well, neither can we. Donald E. Keyhoe was one of the most important of the pioneer UFO researchers, and in every respect a whistleblower for his ability and commitment to waking up the world to the seriousness, reality, and implications of UFOs. Number 4, Dr. James E. McDonald. Dr. McDonald was an atmospheric physicist of great intelligence who had the courage to attempt bringing the subject of UFOs to the serious attention of both the American public and the scientific community. As he became more involved in the field, he grew to feel that neither the Air Force's Project Blue Book nor the scientific community were paying proper attention to the phenomenon. Reading the CIA's 1952 Robertson Panel Report convinced him that the Air Force's efforts were being directed towards a cover-up and debunking effort. Scientist Jacques Vallée was impressed with the newcomers' resolve and later wrote that, quote, it is clear that an entire era has come to an end. This man has many contacts, many ideas, and he is afraid of nothing, end quote. From this point on, almost all of McDonald's professional efforts were devoted to UFO investigations and to convince scientists, politicians, journalists, and other opinion makers of the seriousness of the subject. In doing so, he identified himself as a, quote, enemy to the Air Force, and an internal memo issued at about this time discussed the need to, quote, fireproof him, end quote. Air Force slang for discrediting someone, FYI. His one-man crusade included the interviewing of hundreds of UFO witnesses, continued research, and lecturing to as many other scientific and professional associations as he could. But it was the combined effort of Harvard astronomer Donald K. Menzel and Philip Klass that finally brought him down. Klass, an editor and writer for Aviation Week magazine, successfully petitioned the Navy's Office of Intelligence to drop their support for what many considered crackpot research. By 1970, MacDonald had isolated himself from his more conservative colleagues, and his opinions about UFOs were now being used against him more and more effectively. On June 13, 1971, he purchased a handgun from a Tucson pawn shop and took his own life in the Arizona desert. This is the seriousness involved in being a UFO whistleblower in our community at large. Number 3, Gordon Cooper. Gordon Cooper was one of the original 7 Mercury astronauts, and for this alone rightly deserves a distinguished place in the history of space exploration. But Cooper went above and beyond the superhuman challenges of sitting atop an Atlas 7 rocket to become the first of America's space travelers to let the world know, in no uncertain terms, that we were not alone. And not just during his years with NASA. In a 1978 statement prepared for the United Nations, Cooper made it known that his first experience with UFOs predicated his historic space flight by many years, and occurred in the skies over Germany in 1951. Quote, "Several days in a row, we sighted groups of metallic saucer-shaped vehicles at great altitudes over the base, and we tried to get close to them, but they were able to change direction faster than our fighters. I do believe UFOs exist, and that the truly unexplained ones are from some other technically advanced civilization," end quote. Cooper was certainly no UFO cultist or fan. If anything, he, like most of the other members of the astronaut corps, were understandably reluctant to discuss the things they had seen with their own eyes, but felt strongly that we should have a top-level coordinated program to scientifically collect and analyze from all over the Earth concerning any type of encounter, and to determine how best to interface with these visitors in a friendly fashion. We may first have to show them that we have learned to resolve our problems by peaceful means, rather than warfare, before we are accepted as fully qualified universal team members. In our opinion, Gordon Cooper's devotion to the truth and willingness to put his well-earned personal reputation on the line more than qualify him for inclusion on this list of the top 10 UFO whistleblowers of all time. Coming in at number 2, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. One of the most respected and highly credentialed individuals in this elite club of UFO whistleblowers is Dr. Edgar Mitchell. In February 1971, Captain Mitchell piloted the Apollo 14 lunar landing module down to the lunar surface and became the 6th of only 12 men to walk on the moon. Following his return to Earth, the astronaut was contacted by some of the relatives of those who had been involved in the UFO crash outside of the town of Roswell, New Mexico, where by coincidence Mitchell had personally grown up. Quote, "Including the person who delivered the child-sized coffins to the Air Force to contain the alien bodies, another was one of the children of the deputy sheriff who was patrolling traffic around the site," end quote. Taking their and other such accounts seriously, he began to devote much of his time to facts surrounding UFOs, as well as studying human consciousness and paranormal and psychic phenomena. Dr. Mitchell, who graduated from MIT with a doctorate in aeronautics, has long been the most outspoken of all the astronauts with regard to the subject of UFOs, and has spent much of his professional life on the lecture circuit, speaking, making his views clear to audiences around the world. Edgar Mitchell is absolutely convinced that the UFO cover-up must end and will likely never back down in pursuit of this goal. When asked if anyone had ever threatened him in regard to this, he stated, quote, "No, but they wouldn't be very successful with me if they tried," end quote. Seekers of truth about the UFO phenomena are fortunate to have this decent and courageous man standing with them, and in no uncertain terms, a UFO whistleblower and American hero. And our number one top 10 UFO whistleblower of all time, Major Jesse Marcel Sr. Today, Jesse Marcel Sr. is regarded as one of, if not the most significant UFO whistleblower of all time. In fact, without Marcel, the story of the Roswell, New Mexico crash might never have come to public attention. A few months after Pearl Harbor, Jesse joined the Army Air Force and received training in photo analysis and intelligence and served as a squadron intelligence officer in the Philippines. After the war, he was reassigned to the Roswell Army Airfield and the 509th Bomb Wing, then the only nuclear strike force in the world. It was while serving there as their base intelligence officer that Major Marcel became one of the first two officers to visit the site of a debris field where something unknown had crashed in the early hours of July 1947. There was no question in the officer's mind that the debris was not of this earth. After the base commander ordered him to make the discovery public, the order was countermanded by the Pentagon, and Major Marcel suffered worldwide humiliation when he was forced to pose by the remnants of a weather balloon. Now reviled by his brother officers, the stigma of this incident followed Jesse Marcel through the remainder of his military career and into an obscure civilian life. It was not until 1978 when he was brought to the attention of nuclear physicist and UFO researcher Stanton T. Friedman that his story was first made public and the Roswell story broke upon the American, then the world public. Few people in the world of UFO whistleblowers suffered more or longer than Major Jesse Marcel Sr. did, and his willingness to go on the record was one of the most important events in UFO history, and that is why he is our number one top 10 UFO whistleblower. We live in a world where the great majority of our friends, family, and co-workers, not to mention the public at large, are sleepwalking their way through their lives and through an illusion that we human beings are alone in the cosmos. They know that UFOs are not real and follow a simplistic, diluted logic. They can't be, therefore they aren't. Therefore, they must be something else. How wonderful it must be to know the unknowable. But despite this entrenched and dominant culture of ignorance, researchers, investigators, and authors have been doing their best to get to the bottom of the UFO mystery. While these inquisitive souls will certainly continue to search for the answers to this elusive phenomenon, the work of the whistleblowers, be they from the military, the intelligence community, or the civilian sector, is crucial to making the advances so necessary in raising public awareness and in filling in the huge blanks in our collective knowledge as to why the visitors are here, their means of travel, and where they are from. UFO TV salutes these brave individuals and wishes them well in their difficult path they have chosen to travel. I'm Jesse Randolph Singer. Thanks for joining us for the top 10 UFO whistleblowers of all time. Think we missed one? Leave a comment in the section below and tell us what you think. We're always listening.